Hello and welcome to another episode of Bloomsbury Radio at Bloomsbury Institute London. The show is The Letter of the Law, and we're also distributing this show via the London Legal Podcast via the channels of Hodge Jones and Allen Solicitors, who will be hosting the show. We're pleased to be talking about the Personal Injury Law Clinic today, and the subject is accidents at work. The show is going to be slightly different today because while we've got our legal experts in the house, we're really pleased as well to welcome two students as well, and we'll be hearing plenty from them. So the subject of today's topic is accidents at work within the context of personal injury. First, I'm pleased to announce that we have Daniel Denton, partner from the personal injury team at Hodge Jones and Allen, and also Jack Foran, a paralegal working alongside Dan. Daniel and Jack, do you quickly want to say hello?
Hello listeners. Yes, so my name's Daniel Denton. I'm a partner in the personal injury department at Hodge Jones and Allen. I became qualified in 2001, so 25 years ago now, and I've actually specialised in claimant personal injury work all of my life. So when I first qualified, I worked for a large trade union law firm called Rowley Ashworth for the first 10 years of my legal career. And when I first started there, I first started with small claims. And I can remember on the first day when my supervising partner came over to me with a trolley full of files and said to me, "Hi Daniel, welcome to the firm, off you go." And I basically taught myself how to do small claims. And then I gradually worked my way up in the firm to deal with more larger files. And eventually I now deal with people who suffered from catastrophic life-changing injuries, and I also now deal with people who have lost loved ones through fatal accidents as well. And my range of specialism ranges not just from road traffic collisions but also accidents at work, and the majority of the work I did in the first 10 years of my career was accidents at work, and also any other occasions where someone suffered a one-off accident. So that may be someone who suffered an accident in a public place or in a private place. It might be someone, for example, who suffered an accident as a result of a defective product, for example. Any situation whatsoever. So I really enjoy personal injury work. I've always worked on the claimant side for the whole of my 25 years, and I find the job really, really satisfying. And it's really a pleasure to try and represent people and make a big difference to their lives in terms of securing rehabilitation for them and to maximise their compensation.
You hinted at that, and just before I turn to Jack, why PI, personal injury, as a specialism?
That's a really good question. So, like probably most graduates, when I went out and finished with university, I wasn't quite sure which area of law I wanted to specialise in. So what I did was I tried to arrange some work experience in many different organisation and different types of law as possible. Because originally I wanted to do family law, but then as I did some work experience in family law, I didn't really enjoy it that much. And then I started doing some work experience in personal injury law, and I found that my skill set quite neatly matched what I was doing. And I would say that some of the key skills if you're going to become a personal injury lawyer is to have a good memory, to be very well organised in your work, and also you need to have the personal skills as well. So you need to have that sense of empathy towards the clients and listening skills, so that clients can actually they know that you're actually taking what they're saying to you seriously, and they've got confidence you're going to represent them properly.
Great. Now, Jack, first time for you to be on the show for the London Legal Podcast and the Letter of the Law. Tell us about yourself, and similar to what I just asked Daniel, why personal injury for you as a focus area?
Yes, no, thank you, Sarah. My experience pales in comparison to Daniel's. He's got over 25 years of experience compared to my just coming up to 4 now, having joined Hodge Jones now about just over 3 to 4 years ago. Into the personal injury department. I'd say it's a bit of a happy accident that I stumbled into personal injury, and it's what I really enjoy about it is the variety. It's the fact that there is such a range of different cases that you have when you are coming to handling your own caseload, as I do, like Dan, but also just for our clients. There's a range of areas which we cover, and unfortunately, in the sort of the more tragic world that we are working in, accidents at work, for example, or road traffic accidents, accidents in public places, they affect clients in so many different ways. And that variety brings about a need for specialism from all of our colleagues in the department. I have an experience of running my own fast track cases for maybe 2 years now. Fast track cases being claims that are between sort of £5,000 and £25,000 in value, and that getting towards determining how much a claim is worth is a bit more of an exact science, but it's not the type of claim that Daniel is running, which is more of a catastrophic injury claim, a sort of high value brain injury cases, amputee cases, etc. But what it does allow me to do is have a variety of my cases. In terms of the type of work that I do, I assist Daniel with his cases when he's doing his sort of higher value work, but then I'm allowed to go off on my own and accept instructions from clients and take them through that process up until the point at which a case needs to be issued, i.e. litigated at court. At that point, that's when I step away and a solicitor comes in to assist and to take over the running of the claim.
Great. Quick question before I turn to our students. Jack and Daniel, what do you both like to do outside of work? Jack, you go first.
Oh gosh, if I go into running, you'll probably get me on a real tangent, and I'll say that I run everywhere, but it's not as much as that. I think the cinema is probably my biggest thing. Movies, films, a bit of a critique, and I feel like if I'm not, rummaging through a law review or a document review, I'm probably reviewing a film of some sort. So that's probably my sort of the aspect of my life that's outside of work.
Okay, and Daniel?
Yes, so I have 3 children, so I spend a lot of my time with my young family, and we love going out together to different places. We try and encourage our kids to go outdoors, my wife and I. So we like nature, and also for my sins as well, I also follow Nottingham Forest because I'm a glutton for punishment. So yeah, that's mainly what I do in my spare time.
I've got you beaten for that. I support Blackburn Rovers for my sins.
Oh dear.
Yes.
And then I come in to support West Ham United and win the whole thing, I think.
You have. Okay,
Yes.
So at the top of the show, I mentioned that we're really pleased to have 2 students with us. And I'm really pleased to bring them both in. We have Ethan Blades and Faith Marsha. Just before I turn to you each, shout out a quick hello, both of you.
Hello, my name's Ethan Blades.
Hello, my name is Faith Marsha.
Great. Ethan, let's turn to you first. If you could tell our audience about yourself, where you are with your studies, why PI as an area of law interests you, that would be great.
So I'm very, very new to the legal scene. I'm in my first year, so I've still got a long way ahead of me. Hopefully qualifying as a solicitor in 3 years. That's the aim. That is the aim, but we'll see if that actually happens. I've only just started in personal injury. That's what I'm learning at the moment. I'm only a few weeks in, so questions around it, I will not be the person to be answering those today. And I really chose law just because I really like how you can help people, and you can actually really help people. And that's why I'm interested in personal injury, because £25,000 to a big corporation is actually not making much change to that corporation, but to a family who's actually had life-changing injuries and it's affected their ability to work, that can be kind of a year's rent almost, which can make really big impacts in people's lives that I think you'll be able to see. And that's just from my very limited amount of knowledge and from what I've seen and from what I've heard about in the clinic as well.
And from the perspective of a student, the personal injury law clinic, which we're here to talk about today, it brings in students to have some time alongside experts such as Daniel, alongside those who really know the area well, like Jack. From your perspective as a student, what does that mean to you to be able to interface with lawyers, seasoned lawyers in this field that know this subject inside out?
Well, I just think it's something that you can't be taught in a classroom. we have our lectures, and our lecturers are great. I love all my lecturers. They all have experience in the legal field. We're sat there and we'll talk about personal injury, and we'll even set up fake case scenarios, but it's not real. It's not real, and when you're doing the work, you know it's not real. So having the opportunity to actually go and see real people in action in their work, which is something that I hope to do in the future, it's almost seeing a little bit of a reflection of what you hope to achieve in somebody else and gaining experience as well, which is just an opportunity that a lot of unis don't offer, and an opportunity that a lot of firms don't do. So I know I can say for everyone at Bloomsbury, we're very, very grateful to be given that opportunity.
Thank you, Ethan. Now, Faith, let's turn to you. Tell us a bit about yourself, your background, your exposure to personal injury, and your feelings about the clinic more widely. That would be great.
Hello, my name is Faith Masha. I'm a second-year student at Bloomsbury. I'm currently learning about ethics and conducts for lawyers. I think that the law clinic itself is really, really important because I believe it just allows that exposure for students. As Ethan said before, when we sit at our desks and we learn about law, it's very different from having a hands-on experience. And sometimes reading can create sort of a disconnect between ourselves and that area that we're learning and how it impacts people, especially with personal injury, because that has a direct impact on people's lives and they are sort of put in a vulnerable position, and we don't really get that sort of exposure and just get that connection to clients. So being able to work alongside like legal representatives and being able to understand how these cases sort of fall out in real time and the direct effects that it has on the clients is so valuable, such a valuable experience. It allows for so much thought to be put in it, and we genuinely see how these cases sort of unfold. I really think that's important for lawyers because as we are learning and as we're growing, it's important for us to have that sort of hands-on experience in each aspect of our career. And I think it's effective, and I think that more schools should allow that experience for others.
Great. If I can come in on that, I mean, the experience that their students are going to get, like I say, preaching to the converted is invaluable. Mm-hmm. And being about 4 years, 5 years disconnected now from my own studies, I wish I had had this type of opportunity. Yeah. I feel like lots of law schools back when I was studying did not have, they maybe had the odd school exclusion project or something along those lines, which really was quite specific and not as generalised, especially for budding solicitors, because the client relationship that the client solicitor relationship that you get from doing these sessions is complete. It absolutely is invaluable. And the solicitor is the connect for the client to this really, really, complicated and confusing and heartbreaking process, especially in personal injury, of going through the court system, getting prepared to litigate cases, having to go through, back and forth with a defendant and with their insurers. It's something that gets the students to see exactly how you're supposed to talk to a client, how you're there to be the shoulder for them to cry onto points, how you're supposed to be the one that explains this whole process for them and brings it to a more simple light for them. It just allows them to put their mind at ease, especially in the personal injury context, because it allows them to focus on what's most important to them. This is the client. That is to focus on your recovery, focus on getting better, focus on getting yourself back to your very best, or as best as is possible before what happened to you happened. Whereas the solicitor or the practitioner, in a sense, can take that load, bear that burden of what's going on in the legal process.
Sure. Thanks, Jack. And Faith, for you to actually work with local members of the community, what does that mean to you?
I think it's a really personal experience. I believe just getting to connect with the client and being able to see their side of the story makes so much of a difference. A lot of the times where we're sitting in class, we kind of see those clients as just words on paper, but having to see them as real human beings that go through all these struggles and are struggling through something that really creates a sort of that client relationship, and that just allows for your heart and allows for empathy to grow during that, and allows you to sort of navigate their case in a different way. It's a really good experience, because I think just being alongside these lawyers and alongside these people, it just helps you grow, not only as a lawyer, but as a person with empathy. And I really think that just creates a well-rounded experience for everyone involved.
Great. So we're here today talking about personal injury, the Personal Injury Law Clinic at Bloomsbury Institute London, in conjunction with Hodge, Jones and Allen, solicitors, and the subject is accidents at work. If you are just joining us now and you're hearing the words personal injury, accidents at work, and you actually want to make a claim or to make an inquiry, then there's several ways you can do that. First thing you can do is visit the Bloomsbury Institute London website, and in the search engine look up Law Clinic. You'll then be directed to a page where you will find an inquiry form. You can input your details, and those details will come straight through to the lawyers that we have on our show today. The other way you can do that, to find out more about your legal rights, is to get in touch with us via phone. The number is 033 00 294 446, and of course there's email, bilradio, that's bilradio @hja.net. Okay, so let's get into the meat and bones of the show. We're talking about the Personal Injury Law Clinic. But before we go any further, Daniel, tell us a bit more about the firm that you're working in, Hodge, Jones and Allen.
Yes, Hodge, Jones and Allen Solicitors was founded in 1977, and for the last 49 years we've helped thousands of people gain access to justice. Now, often we're going to have to take on cases other firms don't even wish to take on because they're too risky. But because our strong ethos is access to justice, we're the type of firm that will take that risk and take those more difficult cases on. And also, the other thing we need to bear in mind is that we're not afraid of dealing with challenges to achieve the best results for our clients. So some of these more difficult cases, and they do often present more complex, challenging issues in the cases, because we've got a dedicated, experienced team of experts, we're able to take on those more complex cases as well and get these fantastic results. We've got a really strong company ethos of fighting for people's rights, which sits very well with this law clinic, which we're going to be able to enable people to get access to free legal advice, and that's going to be irrespective of their financial position.
Okay, and this collaboration between Bloomsbury and Hodge, Jones and Allen and this clinic, Jack, how did this clinic come about? How did this collaboration first bear fruit?
Well, we're coming up to an anniversary, really. We're coming up to the first year since we've really been in partnership. Daniel approached Bloomsbury in March 2025 and asked them if HJA could partner with Bloomsbury just to run a remote personal injury clinic. Thankfully, Bloomsbury Institute was very keen on the idea, and so Daniel organised a remote PowerPoint presentation to present to the Bloomsbury students. At the same time, we got together to draft an inquiry form for members of the public to complete, and then we set out about promoting the project. It's been a couple of stages really to get us through to this point, but it's become a bit of a blueprint now that we're really, I think Dan's definitely proud of using, and it, I think, gets us the best access to the students, and it really gives a lot of light and it gives a lot of information out to the clients or potential clients who need this legal advice. It seems like a really easy and sort of stress-free way of getting to legal advice, and it seems like a more boots on the ground approach. University clinics, they're part of the community, they're part of your local area, they're a trusted source as well. You know that if you're coming to a university or to a place like the Bloomsbury Institute, that you're getting a genuine good service that genuinely cares about your needs and what you're looking for.
And Daniel, from your perspective, as this partnership came together, what were the collective objectives, the collective aims of this partnership?
Yes, there were several aims that I had in mind when I first thought about this project. The first was in relation to social justice, so I was very keen to improve access to justice by providing free, confidential legal advice to members of the local community, and this would be on a range of issues which would include personal injury law. And I think this was particularly important given, first of all, we've had these vast legal aid cuts which has really had a very negative impact on access to justice. and also we found that a lot of firms have been closing down. The resources are extremely limited as well.
Mm-hmm.
I also thought it was really important for universities themselves to build some really meaningful local relationships with businesses, and that's another added benefit in terms of a social justice perspective as well.
Sure.
Building this deeper connection with the local companies. And then in terms of from a student's perspective, there are lots of different skills which the Law Clinic helps students to prepare so that eventually when they go into the legal profession they're a lot better equipped to actually first of all interview and finally get their first job. So first of all, in terms of soft skills, one really, as I've touched on previously, one really important skill of personal injury is to have this empathy, and it's really, really important to listen to the client's needs. And so that's definitely a skill that the students will be able to observe and see when they speak to the clients. Often they're in quite a desperate state when they see to you. Very often clients have never been to a firm of solicitors before, so it's a very nerve-wracking experience. So in order to gain their trust and confidence, it really does test your listening skills and your ability to have a lot of empathy towards them. Another really vital skill, which is not really mentioned very often in law clinics, is in terms of business development. So I've noticed over time that my job has gradually evolved in terms of more of an emphasis now of building business development and having those skills to actually first of all develop relationships with other people and harness those and grow those. And what I always say to students as well is, as well as participating in law clinics, don't be afraid to also promote them as well. I think that's a really key skill to have, and it often will give you an edge when it comes to getting your first training contract or paralegal position, because it's the sort of thing that from an employer's point of view you look for. So what I always like to tell my students is that on the first day when you're interviewed as an employer, you want to know that I could send you out on a first day to a law fair, for example, and at that law fair, first of all, you're going to be able to speak to all the important people around you, help develop their skills, make sure you don't say anything that's going to upset them, because that could be equally as damaging, but also to help improve it by charming them and knowing how to behave, and etc. etc. You're going to introduce yourself to the right sort of people, and these are the sort of skills that the law clinic indirectly teaches you. So please, as much as you can, please and get involved with promoting the clinic. It is a really useful skill to have. Another really important skill for the clinic is learning how to deliver negative advice to a client, because it's very easy to give client positive advice that they want to hear, but often it's the negative advice where you have to give that advice in a more delicate way. So that's another really important skill. And one thing I really enjoy doing with the students is passing on my knowledge in terms of employability. So in the past, I've actually had to interview people for trainee solicitor positions. So I've had situations where we've had 150 applications. We've had to narrow it down to 10, 15 people to be interviewed, and then interview them as well. And so there's certain things I kind of look for in a CV, what I'm looking for in a person. So I'll give you a few examples. Firstly, I'd like a student or an employee who's quite rounded, someone who's not going to cause any problems within my team, so they're going to be a good fit in well, and display those personal skills that I think are so crucial, particularly in personal injury cases. So that's the thing where I can actually think the clinic can offer. But all I'd say is just absorb as much information as you possibly can.
Great.
I mean, to jump off what Dan's saying there in terms of employability, it's a general expectation that any law student that's going for a role such as a legal assistant or a paralegal or for a training contract is obviously that they want to become a solicitor, they want to work in a law firm, they want to become a practitioner of the law. And by doing these legal clinics, you're showing us immediately that you understand what a solicitor does. You've already taken on that role of the fact-finding aspect, the empathy aspect, understanding what they're going through. Show us that you can do the job already, Don't come in at sort of a basic level of I'm maybe quite good at legal administration, good at legal review, legal researching, etc. If you can say, look, I've been able to do this like a solicitor would, like the job that I hope to have and hope to attain at your firm, we look at that in a far more beneficial light, far more sort of positive light. We see you're not just looking at it one job, one step at a time. You're looking forward to the role of solicitor. You're saying to us, we can do this role now, but with your help and guidance and training and experience building up through the law firm, that's what will round you into a well-rounded solicitor.
Great. Interesting, we're all talking about training contracts because our next episode on the Letter of the Law on the London Legal Podcast will be talking about training contracts.
You'll have to have Dan and I back then, I think.
Yeah, no, that's not a coincidence. It's just it's going to be a really interesting show because, as you mentioned, the competition is rife. It's just getting more and more fierce. But those are some free tips from everyone. But yeah, we will be having a dedicated show on that. That's going to be in the next few weeks. So Jack, if I'm listening to this, I'm from the local community. I'm tuning in to Bloomsbury Institute London and Bloomsbury Radio. And I'm thinking to myself, this remote personal injury clinic sounds really interesting. How exactly does it work? What would you say to that person?
So the clinic works by a member of the public completing the inquiry form. And so the students, like the two that we have here today, will then arrange a 30-minute remote meeting on either Teams or Zoom. That will all be set up for you. Don't worry, you don't need to be tech savvy. You don't need to understand how it all works because that's the whole point. It's about ease of access to justice. Mm-hmm. Everything is put on a plate for you to allow you to seek justice in the easiest way. They'll have that meeting, and that allows the members of the public, members of the community, to obtain free legal advice on any personal injury claim or issue that they have. After the meeting, the students will then draft a letter of advice, which will be sent around to a member of staff at HJA, often my colleague Dan, and that final version will be sent off to the client. So the client and the member of the public, the local community, can be confident in the fact that this has been checked at multiple levels. Mm-hmm. The students are getting a good chunk of this and being able to learn from it, but it's all supervised by an experienced practitioner, somebody who they would probably like to be running their claim in the future, somebody who they could trust their claim to, but somebody who they trust and know has the experience to understand what's going on.
So you mentioned an inquiry form. If a member of the public wants to make an inquiry and to find out a bit more about their legal rights, where can listeners find that inquiry form if they want to get in touch?
So that is all online. All online, the Bloomsbury Institute London website. So that's www.bil.ac.uk. And you find the Law Clinic page. Just simply type in Bloomsbury Law Clinic, and that's to look up Personal Injury Law Clinic page and to get the inquiry form. It's very simple. You fill out some details about what happened and provide your contact details. Try and be as clear and succinct as possible. Think about the key details, what's impacted you most, the key details about when it happened, what time, the location, all these sorts of things that will assist the students and Daniel, and our colleagues at HJA to understand your claim to the best extent. There's also a direct inquiry line as well, so you can call us on the phone. The number for that is 03300 294 446, or you can simply do it via email, which is bilradio@hja.net.
Great, thank you. Now, you don't want to hear my boring voice throughout the course of the show, and that's why I'm going to bring in our two students, because their dulcet tones are far more interesting to listen to. Ethan, I'm going to start with you. We've got a couple of questions that you're going to ask, and then Faith can join in. Let's see if Daniel and Jack can tackle these questions.
So one thing that I was kind of interested is, at this clinic, what type of accidents are going to be covered? Because I was thinking, obviously, Daniel, you work at very high-end personal injury claims. So I didn't quite understand what level of injury claims that is covered at this clinic.
That's a good question. So we deal with any type of accident, no matter what the value is, as long as it's a one-off accident where someone suffered an injury. So that's the only criteria we set. So there's a range of different types of accidents at work we come across. Sometimes accidents at work are caused by other employees, and we can sometimes make a claim on those. It's something called vicarious liability. As a student, it's a term you'll either be familiar with or come across in due course. We also, for example, deal with people who suffered slips and chips in the workplace. So they might have had some liquid or something on the floor, they might have slipped over it. Manual handling tasks, so any heavy labour, we would deal with that where someone suffered an injury. So typically someone lifting, say, a box and they've suffered a back injury, for example, we would definitely deal with cases such as those. People have been exposed to defective machinery, so perhaps maybe it's a machinery without a guard on it and they've got their finger trapped in it, for example. We deal with cases like that. Unsafe systems of work generally, they're often the most difficult cases to win, where we're just trying to argue that there's no real defective machinery per se or any liquid on the ground, but the actual system that's in operation isn't safe. They're more difficult to prove. Accidents where you work at a height, maybe, for example, you work on a construction site. The overall criteria is always going to be, have you had a one-off accident? Yes. Suffered an injury? Yes, we're prepared to advise a client. Doesn't matter if it's a small claim, it's a large claim, it's a medium-sized claim, because what we're trying to do at the end of the day is also offer that service to the local community. So sometimes telling somebody they haven't got a good claim is as valuable as someone who's pursuing a claim and wasting their money where they're really not going to have much chance of winning. So, we definitely see it as a service to the local community.
Yeah. And on that as well, what tend to be the most common accidents at work? And I'm going to throw in another question as well. It's going to be quite difficult. Okay. What do you think the single most common accident is as well?
Gosh, trying to get the stats out for how many accidents of work and what types there are. I don't have that type of stats on me. I mean, what I can look to is my own experience in my casework. And I think definitely for Dan, unsafe systems of work, they're far more complex in terms of what they require. For me, manual handling is definitely in there because you have lots of situations where employers are expecting their employees to perhaps overwork, and you often have clients who are having to work in, say, shop environments or warehouse environments where they're doing lots and lots of lifting. And manual handling claims are governed by regulations. There is statute and there are regulations which employers have to abide by. But unfortunately, these claims come about because they're just not they're not looked at all. They're just completely, there's a tacit disregard for some of these regulations. And that's what leads to injuries, especially repetitive strain injuries, especially from lifting. If a client hasn't been given the proper training, an employee's not been given the proper training, that's what leads them to have repetitive strain injuries, especially for their back, as Daniel has mentioned. They're being made to work beyond their limits because employers are looking to maximise their profits and get the most out of their employees. And perhaps people that are listening to this podcast today, they're working in, say, a warehouse or a shop or somewhere where they're having to lift heavy boxes, heavy materials, having to lift stock between vans and into the showroom. And they're thinking, well, yeah, my employer's only employed me to do this. These are heavy items weighing 10, 20, 30, 40 kilograms that I'm having to lift without aids, without having a crane or some sort of wheelie to bring everything about. And you're thinking, well, my employer's just told me to get on with it. And after a couple of years, that builds up, it builds up, it builds up. And suddenly you wake up one morning with either a strain or a pain in your back, or suddenly when you're at work and you're doing that type of lifting, your back goes. And suddenly your entire world just gets flipped upside down because of your employer's negligence, because they just said, well, get on with it. You're costing us less money because you've only got to do it for yourself. You're the one employee. We're not going to hire someone else. We're not going to put in place, we're not going to enforce the regulations. Sometimes you'll have a sign up in warehouses that perhaps is there to try and absolve employers of liability, saying, refer to our handbook or something along those lines. But it's really got to be a more clearer look at what the employee needs to do and how they should be lifting. There should be regular training. That training needs to be reinforced maybe once or twice a year. And if a client is having to go into these really strenuous situations for their body, i.e. lots of lifting, and they're not being given the proper guidance on it, that's when perhaps the worst injuries happen, because they haven't been given the right training to know how to lift a certain item. So that's certainly something that comes across my desk a lot. and it's something that I'm sure comes across Dan's a lot as well.
Yes, I'd just like to add to that as well, if I may. One crucial difference we've noticed over the last few years is the cost of living crisis. So what you're tending to find now is that not just employees, but employers are also trying to take shortcuts, cost-cutting cuts, which has obviously impacted on health and safety as well. So you often find situations where you've got an employee who's put in a very difficult situation. Do they try and engage in a task that could be seen to be dangerous, or do they risk not doing it and risk losing their job? And we find that scenarios coming across more and more often now, and we're finding that a lot of the health and safety procedures are being lapsed. That's because of the cost of living crisis. That's what we put it down to anyway.
I mean, it's a case of how it's always been. You have employers who have employed their staff in this manner, and it's always been like this. You just get on and do your job, you don't ask any questions, and you get paid at the end of the day. And employers have been happy for this to persist until an injury happens. And it's quite a depressing thought, because these changes at companies don't happen until somebody is seriously injured. And we often get clients who come to us and say, well, what are you going to do about the employer? They need to pay for this. They need to do something. Something needs to happen to them. And unfortunately, our remit only ends with getting the client as much compensation as possible to navigate them through the legal process. But unfortunately, we can't then do something which brings change about with their employer and with the company that they work for. That really is for the government, and it's for the government to look into. And we can only make suggestions and recommendations on that front. But if you do have these types of employers, or because often we have clients who come to us and say, X, Y, and Z, my colleagues, they knew about this. We all knew it together. We knew that they were being unsafe. We knew that they were cutting corners. We knew that this was going to happen at some point. Keep those people close to you when you are talking about a claim or any type of action, and support your colleagues as well, because if you see one of your colleagues get injured, you can be there as a witness for them. You can be there to say, well, no, whilst they're having issues and perhaps liability is denied in their claim by the employers, by the defendants and their insurers who are acting for them, your witness statement on behalf of your colleague to say, no, you know what, my bosses were definitely not following safety procedure. They were definitely cutting corners. That can be the difference between somebody's claim failing and someone's claim succeeding.
Okay.
That's really interesting to hear, and obviously it comes across as well how passionate both of you are regarding to your work. I know both of you mentioned back injuries. Is that the most common type of injury that you seem to find?
I think orthopaedic injuries generally are the most common types of injuries, but we do come also have different types of injuries such as head injuries. Psychiatric injuries are also quite common, especially nowadays, again, because of this cost of living crisis, and a lot of people, you'd be surprised how many people have mental health issues, and how having an accident can just knock them sideways, mentally as well as physically. But I think the most common injuries is an orthopaedic injury, whether it's a fracture or whether it's a strain, etc., etc. That's the most common thing we come across. They're normally trauma related.
I mean, these accidents are traumatic. Only the client knows how this has impacted them. Only the person who has been injured, who suffered the ill effects of the accident, can really understand themselves. And whilst we go out for our claims and we instruct experts to do assessments of our clients and say, these are the injuries that you've suffered, they have a duty to the court to basically report whether they think the accident was the client's injuries was caused by the accident. You, the client, know your body better than anyone else. You know how you are feeling. And if you are feeling a psychiatric injury, you're feeling depressed, or you're feeling, completely cut up by this experience, it's completely normal. And I think some clients come to the table thinking, oh, okay, I've had this accident at work, my back has been really, ruined by this accident. That's really changed my life. And it's changed my life in the sense that I can't do. So I had a client, it's not an accident at work example, but it is an accident where they've tripped on a pothole in the road, and that's stopped. They've fallen, they've suffered really serious orthopaedic injuries, but these orthopaedic injuries have completely taken them out of reality and taken them out of their life. He used to play football a lot. Football was the one thing that he sort of clung on to, and that sort of made his life a bit more enjoyable. And now he can't do that. And it's really shocking to hear that when they've been through this process or been through an accident, they've been a year or so, how their mood has dropped because they can no longer do what they enjoy. What was quite nice about that one was the client had went out of his way to go and find himself a new joy, a new thing to do. And I was quite pleased to hear that he'd become a semi-pro darts player off the back of a couple of pub trips, I think. And it was something that he could do rather than playing football. He could go and play darts, and that brought him some sense of enjoyment. It's something we absolutely look into when we do bring a claim, is that loss of enjoyment of how a claim has impacted you, your ability to live your life, the daily lives of the daily activities of life. And if that's affecting your psychiatric and your mentality, the way that you're feeling, it absolutely forms a part of your claim.
Great. Faith, you've got a question for our legal experts, haven't you?
Yes, just to piggyback off of that. So we also know accidents at work can happen to anyone at any time and at any place. And when clients are sort of put in that situation, a lot of them don't receive the proper guidance on how to navigate their situation. So I want to know that if someone suffers at work, what steps should they take immediately afterwards?
Yes, so I can take that one for you. So there are some really good practical steps that one could do when they have an accident at work. The first really important thing to do is report the accident immediately, ideally to your line manager, or if your line manager is unavailable, to another manager who's present at the scene. If you're unfamiliar with that manager, try and find out what their name is so that can be traced later on down the line, and try and make a mental note of what the approximate time of the accident was when it was reported, what time it occurred, when it was reported, how long afterwards was it reported. Also, try and be familiar with your surroundings as well. So, was there any CCTV footage, for example? Were there any witnesses who you saw witness what happened? If so, perhaps try and get their details down so that later on, if you do wish to make a claim, then we can approach those witnesses and try and see what they actually saw and hopefully provide a witness statement to help prove the claim. Also, ask the employer if an accident report form is available to be completed. Now, sometimes an employer will say you must complete the accident report form yourself. Other times you might find such as a health and safety officer who will complete the accident report form for you and ask you to sign it. So if you're asked to sign it, it's really important that whatever is written is completely accurate. So if there's any changes you wish to make, don't be afraid to make the changes and initial them. Don't just feel compelled to sign what's in front of you. You're bound to be in a lot of shock, often in these sort of cases as well. But like I say, always check what you're required to sign. Try and see if a first aider sees to you. If they do, there should be a first aider's report. So ideally, you'd like the name of the first aider as well, so that can be traced back as well. Now, in relation to medical treatment, we always say to our clients, it's important you go and get medical treatment as soon as possible. That may be, for example, going directly to a hospital or to your GP. And when you go to the hospital GP, make sure you explain properly what happened. Okay? And then what we always say is try and seek advice from a law firm as quickly as you possibly can. And we say that for lots of reasons. First is that if you do require any rehabilitation treatment, then when we first notify the insurance company about the claim, we invite them to actually fund some rehabilitation treatment privately. So rather than the client being stuck in the NHS system and obviously with long waiting lists, we ask the insurance company, were you prepared to fund some rehabilitation treatment as well? So that's one big advantage of making the claim early. The second is that because the burden of proof is on the claimant to actually prove a claim, we have to start the evidence gathering process as soon as possible. Now, part of that is to obtain witness statements from people who witnessed the accident. The longer you leave that, the more people's what they remember, their recall fades away in time. So all of these are advantages of actually going to a law firm early. And the other really crucial point is in relation to CCTV footage. So often people delete CCTV footage after, say, 28 days. So the quicker you can notify the insurance company of the claim, the better, because it enables them to preserve it as well.
We've got so much to unpack during this conversation, to the point where we're going to need a part 2 for this. There's no doubt about that. So before we close part 1 of this show, given the time and the student involvement and all of the fascinating elements of accidents at work, I just want to ask one final question at this stage. Jack, Daniel, for both of you, if you're listening to this and you're wondering what's involved in making a personal injury claim with a legal representative such as yourself, can you explain a bit about that process?
Yeah, so as I've said previously, we need to try and get help as quickly as you possibly can, because that's going to give you the best opportunity to gather all of the evidence together. So what you would do is you'd go to the law clinic straight away, fill the form in, and then we would try and arrange the appointment as quickly as possible. We also need to consider whether you as a client would belong to a trade union or not.
Right.
Because if it belonged to a trade union at the time the accident had occurred, they're a trade union member, they might be able to get free legal advice through that particular trade union. Jack, I don't know if you want to comment in relation to road traffic accidents.
Well, I think timing, I think, is the most important thing. Just you need to have at least some degree of urgency. Obviously, whenever you've had an accident, you need to take time to process it. But you must remember that, and there's a couple of variations of it, but there is limitation for bringing your claim. It's 3 years from the date of the accident. That is the general rule. It's a bit different for children, and it's a bit different in terms of capacity issues. But the general rule, and seek further legal advice on it, is 3 years. So 3 years from the date, especially if we're talking about accidents at work, 3 years from the date of your accident. And that means that if you don't bring the claim, i.e. the claim isn't litigated or brought or issued, court issued, within those 3 years, you won't be able to bring a claim at all. You're completely statute barred. There's a Limitation Act which prevents you from doing it. And the reason why that exists is to stop anyone bringing a claim sort of 10, 20, 30 years down the line.
Sure.
It's completely understandable why it's in place. But simply just get legal advice as soon as possible and then make a decision on how you want to proceed. Get all your cards on the table first. Get the legal advice, come through the clinic, find the solicitor or the practitioner who is right for you, and that's how that should really be your first point of call for any type of accident at work claim.
Great. So we are going to have a part 2 to follow up on the personal injury clinic and accidents at work. But before we finish, I just want to underpin the fact that if you are listening, you want to make a potential inquiry or you want to know more about your legal rights, then you can find out more about the personal injury clinic that Bloomsbury Institute Law Clinic is running. Just check out the website on Bloomsbury Institute London and look out for, in the search engine, Bloomsbury Law Clinic. You'll then be directed to a page where you can complete an inquiry form that goes straight through to our legal experts. If you've got a phone to hand and you're listening, then just call through on 033 00 294 446, and you can also email bilradio @ha.net. We've been joined today by Daniel Denton, partner at Hodge Jones & Allen Solicitors, and Jack Foran, paralegal at HJA. We've also had the pleasure of the company of 2 students, Faith Marsha and Ethan Blades, and all 4 of us will be back for part 2 on accidents at work. Thank you very much for listening.